Want to touch on a very important subject, which is double standards in socio-political discourse. I was going to say double standards in public life, which is important, but um, I'm not necessarily talking here about um, public figures who are accused of being hypocrites in regard to ordinary people, so to speak. I'm thinking more in terms of double standards of taboo subjects. This is actually extremely important, and it certainly causes a lot of debate and rift, but does it get enough media coverage? I'm not sure that it does. Um, it's something that I've always felt very wary of because I think it's more than anything else, it really stokes up the flames of the culture wars, at least a perception of double standards. Not everyone will have exactly the same idea of what double standards are. But two that come to mind is the idea that anti-male sexism or anti-white racism are somehow trivial things. Now, I mention those two because they fall into the very potentially inflammatory subjects of sexism and racism. Racism in particular this year it is such a dicey subject. It's such a fragile subject. Um, but I really would make a call for reason. For reason. What I find frustrating about this is that I know what my values are, and I know that throughout life I have been as consistent as I can in terms of the standards I hold to people. We're all human, we all have our faults. I I have many shortcomings. I'm sure there's people out there who look at my videos, maybe they find me arrogant, maybe they find me opinionated. There may be a number of things they don't like about me. But I can honestly say that I do try hard to be consistent in my values. And if I have criticized someone for something that I've done myself or an opinion that I've had that might be contradictory, chances are I will have recognized it and retracted it or tried to show some humility over it. Um, Occasionally, for example, I've noticed that I've been vocal in a particular area, then I look back and thought, well, maybe I didn't exemplify the sort of thing that I would want to promote in the best way that I could. Um, but it's something I'm very aware of. Um, but I just think it's a very empty and vacuous thing for people to pontificate about certain subjects and then not hold the same standards to not necessarily themselves as individuals, but the group they're supposedly representing. Um, so if you're from one ethnic group and you denounce the racism in another ethnic group, but you turn a blind eye to the racism in your own ethnic group, then what are you doing? Are you building bridges? Are you helping social cohesion? Are you are you having a conversation? No, you're just fanning the flames of racial tension. Now I'm white, obviously. Um, I do know some white people who are in denial about white racism. I mean, when it is clearly on display, they'll make excuses for it. I've tried hard to be vocal against those sort of people. And certainly in Britain and in the United States and in other countries, there are examples of white bigots just being obnoxious. No question about it. Um, has been a problem in this country, and I'm certainly not one that is in denial of that. But what I would contend is that attitudes that are considered racist towards minorities, and more often than not, they can be racist attitudes. It's not a question mark. More often than not, they are racist attitudes. Though those things are exposed and held up when they're coming from white attitudes, but if the person promoting racist attitudes is black or Asian, they basically get a free pass. And I don't think that's hyperbole because, okay, you'll get white people who will be angry about it, but those in a position of power who would otherwise hold the racist views in question to account won't sufficiently do it, or they might give it a fleeting thought, or they'll even excuse it. We've seen many examples of this. Um, and I hope I don't sound repetitive with this, but it's important to cite examples to exemplify what I'm talking about. Sarah Jong at the New York Times just looked at a thing on Snopes, kind of in preparation for this video. Snopes is the website that sort of analyzes whether things are true or not online. Now, I like Snopes. I think for the most part they're pretty reliable, but they were covering a report, this controversial journalist, Sarah Jong, who many people, including myself, think is a racist. I'm not going to equivocate. I think she is a racist. But basically, he debunked a tweet in which she supposedly said that she hoped that bald white kids had leukemia. Now, that cannot be proven because the tweet hasn't been found. People can delete tweets, so I think it's a bit of a flawed logic to just conclude, oh, well, she never made it. But let's say even she didn't make that one, right? Let's give her the benefit of the doubt and say, okay, she didn't make that one. That's an exaggeration, or that's been taken out of context, or something like that. The fact remains that Sarah Jong did engage in some very inflammatory words about white people. Clearly, she has a lot of animosity towards white people and white men in particular. I don't buy the excuse that she's just retorting to right wing trolls. I think that is an excuse. Even if she, has had abusive messages from right wing trolls, it doesn't conclude that it's okay for her to then take it out on all white people. Um, the thing she came out with, a white person saying that about a minority, there's absolutely no way they would get away with it. I say get away with it because she kept her job at the New York Times and they pretty much defended her. They made a kind of half apology, but it was really weak, watered down. It wasn't anything that would be held to the same standard as if a white person came out with racist comments. And actually, they had apparently previously dismissed white employees who came out with racially charged statements. Now, people might say, well, why are you bringing this up now? It was a few years ago, like it was about 2017, I think. Because it's relevant. She still works for the New York Times. She has a job in a major newspaper. She's never apologized for it. If she had shown some humility and said, I shouldn't have said those things the way I did. I'm sorry if I hurt innocent white people by saying that. Um, but she didn't. So when someone can't accept their own fault in that way, I think, then it's going to open up it's going to open up a dimension whereby they can still be criticized, especially if they've got some sort of public role. I would say Sarah Jong is a semi-public figure. She's a journalist. She's not exactly in the public eye, but she's got a job in famous newspaper. So another example is Dr. Priyambada Gopal, who also made very charged statements about cancelling white people and about white people in general. What happened? She stayed on at Cambridge University and kept her job. There's many examples of this. Munro Bergdorf in the Labour Party, she was eventually kicked out, but not before she come out with a lot of inflammatory comments about men and white people. Um, my concern is when you start saying that some kinds of racism need to be robustly challenged and defeated and denounced, i.e., when it's coming from white racists, but you basically trivialize racism when it's coming from minorities. The argument that, oh, well, white people never experience systemic racism, they're products of a white society, therefore they can't complain, all those sort of things. Actually, what it does is it holds minority people to a lower standard. It's saying that, well, we'll kind of give them a free pass because they're a minority. I think it's rather patronizing. Surely, surely these sort of values should be colorblind. Surely there should be consistency. Surely people should be treated the same. Now, to me, these are the very cores of anti-racist thinking. So, people see the double standards, and to put it bluntly, it makes them. I was going to use a swear word there, but I don't want to be demonetized. It makes people angry. It does. Um, and I think when the narrative is so negative from the likes of Black Lives Matter, then you get this very toxic situation where some minority people will be listening to their rhetoric and they'll be convinced that they're living in an overbearing white racist society, and naturally they're going to be defensive and on edge with that because they're going to think that any misfortune in life, I'm talking about people who are influenced by Black Lives Matter, they're going to just assume it's racism. We see a situation now where any exchange between the police and a black person, oh well, it must be racism. Dawn Butler MP, she's really pushing this thing about the Metropolitan Police being racist because she was stopped, even though the windows on her vehicle were tinted, so they couldn't have seen the ethnicity of the occupant. I think the way she's pushing this is actually an abuse of power. Um, I agree with Esther Kraku on that. If you don't know, Esther Kraku is a black journalist of Ghanaian origin. But unlike other black public figures, she doesn't race bait in that sort of way. I think race baiting, false race baiting, is one of the most egregious things people can do because it just causes so much division. Um, just looking briefly at the American election, I'm very critical of Trump. I'm not going to lie about that. I'm not a fan of the president, but that doesn't mean that I am okay with the Democrats. I mean, let's face it, the Democrats are the party of Black Lives Matter. I mean, there's a huge amount of overlap there. I actually think that if Biden and Harris get into the White House, they'll be more moderate than far left figures are being portrayed to be. Um, I don't think they're stupid. I mean, even Michelle Obama in her speech at the DNC, she didn't mention Black Lives Matter by name. So I think senior Democrats are aware that there is a divisiveness there. I think and maybe they're hypocrites for sort of saying one thing to campaigners and activists and saying something else to the rest of the country. Um, but I'd rather have that than if they were really, really ideologically woke. I don't think that Biden and Harris are actually massively woke. I think they've pandered to woke ideology, which I don't like. But it's obvious why they're doing that. America's so divided right now that it's kind of just they're being the anti-Trump, which is what you would expect. But it's worth bearing in mind Joe Biden has worked with Republicans throughout his career, so he's obviously not that far left. I just don't buy that Republican attack line that he is, a puppet for far left radicals. I just don't think he is. I think there's many areas to criticize Biden on, but I just don't think he's far left. I mean, Sanders, yeah, I'd be concerned about a Sanders presidency for that reason, but Biden, he's a politician. There's a cynical side there. His campaign may well be using the anger from Black Lives Matter, you know, but we'll see if he gets into the White House. We'll see what sort of presidency it turns out to be. I've spoken a lot about racial issues in this. Can't ignore the fact there's also, to a lesser extent this year, but in recent years, the whole male female thing. I was watching a clip earlier of Dominic Raab being interviewed. I think I made a video specifically about this actually, but it was in the lead up to the Conservative leadership contest last year, and Raab was doing relatively well. I think he was like third in the race or something like that. But he's now foreign secretary. But one, I mean, I was going to say the reason his campaign derailed. I think Johnson was always going to win that, but Raab got criticised because he openly said, "I'm not a feminist," and he called out their double standards. I admire that. Actually, in a male politician, that isn't politically easy to do because you'll immediately be denounced as not being an ally or always anti-feminist or, um, you know, I think a male politician has to tread carefully because again, it's like white people wading into anything to do with race. It is so damn sensitive. I think male politicians, unless they're slavishly praising feminism, then when they talk about it, they have to tread carefully. Otherwise, they are cast as anti-feminist or anti-women. Um, Now, from what I could see, all Rab was doing was pointing out the double standards. He even said himself, it's not about feminism; it's about people who talk about equality and then, show anti-male sexism. And I think he's absolutely right. I think there are examples of it. But because I've come at this video from an angle of denouncing anti-white racism and anti-male sexism, I just know there'll be people out there who will say, "Oh well, angry white guy." He's in denial about sexism against women. He's in denial against anti-black racism or challenges that black people face. And that I don't really care what other people think of me, but it's just an example of how the narrative goes. I mean, if I was a public figure, if I was a politician, I'd be cast as far right, or not far right, but certainly be cast as a right winger, even though a lot of my positions would be well to the left, or at least in the centre left. I think that decent people everywhere, I don't care if you're right wing, left wing, male, female, black, white, Asian, gay, straight, whatever it is, if you're a decent person, you should have the integrity to just call out bigotry wherever it exists, whoever it's aimed at. And it's a failure to do that by people in public positions, whether they be prominent journalists, politicians, or celebrities, when they promote double standards. It's a very sad thing if it adds fuel to the fire, because then the shamed party or the shamed group get defensive, and it's just a never-ending cycle. What happened to treating people as individuals? That's how I feel about it. And I could well lose friends over, or acquaintances at least, by being this candid. Some of them watch my videos. Um, I don't know what everyone I'm connected with would think of these opinions. Would they say, "Oh, well, that's Nathan," or would they be disappointed, or would they respect me more? I don't know. But I do think it's important that I'm honest with myself, and my stance has always just been consistency. I believe in treating people as individuals. I don't believe in generalizations of entire groups. I abhor racism. I abhor bigotry of any kind. What we have to work with is reason, fairness, common sense, and facts, which is one reason I'm so anti-Trump, because the man's a compulsive liar. Anyway, I'll round this up, but double standards are just the very core of what causes so many of these culture war divisions. So the next time you sort of look at an angry white guy, he might well be a bigot. He might well be a sexist or a racist. It's possible. But it's also possible he's an ordinary guy who isn't against women's equality, isn't against black and minority people having opportunities in life and recognizing their challenges. It could just be that he's fed up of being shamed. It could just be that he's fed up of distortion and double standards, you know? Um, he may have privilege as you see it, but if you're constantly, if you really have a chip on your shoulder about white men, then you're a bigot. It's as simple as that.